You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders and for coders about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. Before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
Well, I haven't really been fighting. This week has actually been a little bit easier, and I'm working on porting my blog, my company blog, from WordPress to Hexo. Yeah,
I need to look into Hexo. You were telling me about that the other day.
Yeah, it's Node.js based, but what you do is you actually build the site on your machine and then export it.
That's really cool.
So it's just static files. And so there's basically no attack surface.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting like a half a dozen to 50 emails a day of, somebody's trying to access a file that doesn't exist repeatedly, and it's, crazy long URLs and, all this crap intended to breach WordPress and make it act wrong. And, there's all the fake login crap and, there's all these problems. And so I'm gradually working through the process of just moving my blog posts over, and I'm going to kind of redesign the site and probably push it out here in a couple of months and see how that goes.
Oh, that's funny. I've recently found out that I'm apparently a WordPress expert now, at least compared to the average person.
Compared to, I heard you spoke on the phone to she who shall not be named.
Yes, yeah.
Since we don't have permission.
Yeah. For the listeners' edification, that is the wife of he who shall not be named. She is an author, and she sent me a Facebook message that I never saw, but it said that I saw it. So what I'm thinking happened is I leave Facebook running in the background when I'm coding, and sometimes if I get frustrated or something, I'll stop and walk over and play Xbox for a little bit just to kind of clear my head. And if my computer rebooted during that process and she had sent that message, it would have popped up and shown that I'd read it, I guess, and I never saw it.
That doesn't surprise. I mean, the Facebook client is kind of wacky anyway, so it's not really a surprise. But yeah, it's good that you're able to help her out with all that stuff. So yeah, I'm porting it, and I got my server upgraded. We've got 2 new 4 terabyte hard drives in there, so that makes 12 terabytes of storage, and got a bad power supply, so things that should have taken like 30 minutes took longer. Because I was just going to switch out the power supply and put the two new drives in and then put it back in the rack, and it worked out to where that didn't happen. It's still out of the rack. So as we record tonight, we're having to kind of work around the fact that we don't have our cloud.
Yeah, and I would have been there helping him put that in before we recorded, but we're having a little snow down here in Nashville, and so I ended up going home early and playing it safe.
Yeah, that's Nashville. It's the end of the world because it's snowing. It's the end of the world because it's snowing.
I think that's as bad as my singing last week.
Maybe. So, how about you?
Well, so far as fighting, I've been working with parsing some JSON. Talked to you about that at lunch today, which was kind of cool. I had an interview this morning about 5 minutes away from where you work. And then Will and I and he who shall not be named met up for lunch at a sushi place nearby their work. But I've been trying.
Was a cold walk coming back too.
Oh yes, it was. Yeah, I mean, you guys at least had like, you guys were in jeans or stuff like that. I had suit pants on, which are not thick at all.
Yeah.
But I've been working on parsing JSON in C#, and it's interesting because I found this really great tutorial blog post on how to do it, but it only works if it is in the exact format that he has in the blog post. So I'm working on an app to pull our statistics data from the podcast and put it on a mobile-friendly site for us to look at, so I can look it up on my phone, because
And so you can show it off during interviews?
Yes. Well, there is that.
Let's be honest here. That's totally resume-driven development. And it's totally fine.
Yeah. It's been fun doing this. I'm working in Visual Studio, and Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition will only allow me to use MVC5, and that has a lot of issues with it still, in my opinion. And so I was unable to reference a project in the same solution.
So I guess it's time to roll the music, and
yeah, I have something pretty cool for IoTs this week. This week in IoTs, I have something really cool for you guys. I mentioned it in a previous IoTs when I was talking about the Raspberry Pi-based computer that I built for my nieces. So this is the iPassport Raspberry Pi wireless keyboard with touchpad combo, and it's really cool. It is a 92-key full QWERTY keyboard. If you guys remember, if anybody had the LG Envy, it's like a little bit larger than the original Envy keyboard, but it kind of fits in your hand like that did, and so you can use your thumbs to type, or the touchpad is actually, honestly, the touchpad's better than the one on my laptop. I've used this, and it's really nice. It has buttons for, the left and right mouse, as well as a couple of other really neat things like volume control, pause, play, and it's designed to be used with the Raspberry Pi or with a smart TV, or with it can even be used with an Xbox.
Huh.
Yeah, and it comes with
You said it's Bluetooth?
It's Bluetooth. It comes with its own little Bluetooth dongle that you can plug in to the USB port. It also has a power cable, and so you can use it plugged in, or you can charge the battery and then unplug it and use it sitting across the room.
Huh.
Which was really neat, because when I built my niece's computer, we plugged it into the TV in the living room of my parents' house, and I could sit on the couch across the room, and I think I put a few different things on there for him, just from the Linux command line, sitting across the room.
Yeah, that's handy.
Yeah, it really is. When I showed it when they opened up the box with all the computer stuff in it, my brother-in-law saw it and said, I might just take that for myself. And I told him it was only about $15. He's like, I'll just go buy myself one. That's awesome. So, I'll put a link to the Amazon page in the show notes, and it's really cool.
In this week's episode, we're going to talk about conflict resolution. And the reason we're doing this is actually we had a little bit of a conflict last week.
Yeah, we did. Now, of course, this is going to be posted a little while after the actual date that it happened, but we were recording an episode on dating.
Yeah.
I'll just be blatant with it, and I had
written to help developers with their with that part of their lives a little bit.
Yeah, and I had written the episode,
and I didn't feel good about it from the get-go.
No, he didn't. He complained from the very beginning, but we went ahead with it and made some adjustments before we started. But because we've done that before, where you'll have an issue with one or two things, we'll make the adjustment, and then it'll be a good episode.
Yeah.
Sometimes it ends up being a really great episode.
Yeah, but last week everything was off. I mean, just like from the start, it felt like it was like the walls were closing in.
Yeah.
Recording that episode, and he and I are both, we're recording, and of course, I'm sure everybody knows we edit our episodes. Like, so we'll have conversations that we cut pieces out that aren't relevant and that kind of stuff to get it in time and all that. And so there were a lot of editorial notes, it's like, oh, I don't agree with that. And, you know, it was a lot of back and forth, really, the whole time.
What it ultimately boiled down to was I had written the outline with the mindset of I'm writing this to the guys that we were in high school and college.
Yeah.
And
which is a nice way to, scrape something across the old wounds.
Yes.
And besides the fact that there was a little bit of frustration with some of those things that were kind of coming out in your writing. Mm-hmm. And also, I felt like you were not writing in your voice.
I really wasn't.
Yeah, because, we both matured since then. We got out of college in, I finished out in 2002. You finished in 2003. Yeah,
you finished December. I finished in May.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a semester
and
apart.
We were roommates then.
Yeah.
And we both have changed quite a bit. And so that the way that outline was written, it was in the voice of kind of either of us really at that point in our lives, but not either of us now.
I think the problem with it was I was trying to get into the mindset that we had.
You did.
Yeah, I did a really good job of getting...
nailed the mindset. He absolutely nailed the crap out of it. Because, you get past certain points in your life, and I think everybody's got those where you have a worldview and a mindset that doesn't really work, and everything comes to a head. And afterwards, you kind of have a revulsion towards that mindset. And that's kind of what that was. It basically ended on the note last week where Beach goes, I'm getting really frustrated and angry. I said, I am too.
Yeah.
And we stopped and we got a beer. And so we thought, hey, this, it took us a little while. I mean, this isn't instant, right? This isn't a 30-minute solution. Like, we had to kind of dig at it. So we thought...
Hey, we had 2 episodes planned to record that night, and we only...
none.
Yeah. We got none out of it because we spent the time we would have spent recording the second one discussing this.
Well, and this is why we record ahead, right? Is so that we can do that. We don't have to go forward with something that we're not comfortable with, or just doesn't, or feels like off topic, or feels like out of band in some way. We don't have to do that because we can. We have a nice stable of backups. So we kind of thought we would break it down for everybody and kind of talk about how to deal with conflict a little bit, because there's a lot of really good lessons in here for anybody that's dealing with a conflicting type situation.
Yeah, and our conflict resolution back in college doesn't really work as well now that we're older.
Yeah, because we used to put the gloves on and spar.
Yeah.
And, at some point you get too old to have the crap kicked out of you, frankly, either way. Mm-hmm. Because the thing was we could spar and somebody won, but nobody really won because everybody hurt the next day. And we were young enough then that it only hurt the next day.
Yeah, we were young enough then, too, that it got the frustration out of us.
Yeah.
And since then, we've learned different ways.
Strategies.
Yeah, we've got better strategies. I don't know about better. It's just we've got different strategies as we age, because those were really good strategies at the time.
Yeah.
We were both really heavy into martial arts, and so the sparring was good for the frustration, and it was good for practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of worked better, and now that we're professionals at this point, we can't really do that because guys that are in their 20s fight for fun. Guys that are in their 30s, they don't fight for entertainment.
Also in college, if one of us came to class with a black eye or something, everybody would be like, oh, well, he must have had a sparring competition last night or this weekend. Now, if you go to work with a black eye, people look at you funny.
Yeah. And it's a lot of those things. So we had strategies that worked then. And so we thought we would kind of sort of talk through how to do conflict resolution as a bit more mature adult, not a frat boy who wasn't a frat boy. Well, you were a frat boy later in college, but back when we were roommates, we weren't.
A conflict, it's more than just a disagreement.
Yeah, because it's sort of a disagreement with fixed positions. It's like the difference between a skirmish and trench warfare.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. On that same note, conflicts continue to fester if they're ignored.
Yeah, which is what we did. Like, we started off recording the episode and not really getting everything aired in the open. And we got more and more irritated as we were recording. And so, we get to the point where the episode was longer than it needed to be anyway. So we were about an hour and a half in recording when you're finally like, I'm frustrated and angry. And I'm like, so am I. And we just stopped because we both knew at that point that we cannot keep this episode.
Yeah, we stopped, and then I think you got up and grabbed us a couple of beers and said, all right, let's figure this out because this is not normal.
Yeah, it's not that we're always jovial, but we're usually, we're sort of sarcastic and we make fun of things we don't like, not we're mad at each other. The conflict a lot of times is not as big as your perceptions of it. You respond to a conflict based on your perceptions.
Conflicts tend to trigger some very strong emotions.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Because, there was one point, we weren't quite yelling, but it wasn't very far off.
I was explaining it to my dad because we were working on the house today. He was putting in some fans, and I was working on the electrical outlets. He asked me how the podcast was coming. I said, well, last week, I think Will and I almost got into a fist fight.
Yeah, it was. It's like that, just that visceral, well, I'll show him, see who's... And it's like, dude, you're too old to do this crap.
And it's true. My dad looked at me and he's like, what? And I said, well, that's the way we used to resolve our problems. Why do you think I got so heavy into martial arts back in college? Is because when Will and I had an argument, we resolved it on the mat.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like that was all the time, but
that's true.
Put a perspective. And a lot of times when you slug it out, you realize that the thing that you're arguing over is so small. It's completely different than a fist coming at your head.
Yeah, that's very true.
It was like we were taking the problem and taking it on the mat to shrink it to where we could deal with it. And we've got actually some more productive ways to do that, which is kind of what we're going to talk about, that doesn't involve blunt force trauma, which is kind of a plus.
Which leads into the final thing on Conflict 101, and that's what the whole purpose of this episode is. Conflicts are an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, they really are. And we got some really good stuff, honestly, last week, because it was just a lot of stuff that had been brewing in the background that we really needed to deal with.
It was stuff that we hadn't even noticed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the phrase diarrhea of the id was used at some point.
Yes.
And probably by me. Because, again, we were kind of frustrated, but we had some pretty healthy responses eventually. We were a little slower than we needed to be because we lost an hour and a half.
Well, I think what was going on with that was...
Well, you and I both knuckled down. That's our response to adversity is to just hit it harder. And we both have that tendency, and it mostly works. And it's like most things that work, they work until they don't.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
There is that, and I agree with that. And also, you and I are very focused on making this podcast work.
Yeah.
Will and I both have a lot invested in this, just personally, time and money and
thought process and just our general workflow through the week. We know Monday night we're recording.
Yeah,
that's a thing. My daughter, my 7-year-old, realizes we're recording. She's tiptoeing around upstairs. I haven't heard her running.
A few healthy responses would be...
Getting back to that, we kind of got off topic here because
we do
some
that.
of this, we tend to process things a little bit and then we process them again. And that's just sort of the way that he and I both work, and we're kind of aware of that.
And we edit most of the processing out of the
which final. We will this time, so it's all good. The first thing on healthy responses is the capacity to recognize and respond to important matters. A lot of that was trying to figure out what was important, and we had a little bit of a go-round until we
had some almost like mental blocks on it, and we're going to talk about that a little later on in this podcast when we discuss some of the skills for conflict resolution on how to come to what is important and how to realize what's important. But that is what defines a healthy response, is recognizing what's important and what's not. The fact that I was getting angry at Will because of the episode we were doing, that was important.
Yeah, and you worked a lot on that episode, and that was one of those things that, even though I knew that because, holy crap, there was a wall of text.
Well, yeah.
it's very easy to forget that because you see a text file, not the effort required to create the text file. And similarly, I was frustrated because there was a whole lot of things in there that I felt like were not they were not congruent with where you are right now mentally. There were both parties in this situation had stuff that was really, really bothering us.
Yes, we did.
About the episode, about the way the other person was acting. You have that visceral reptilian brain reaction to the whole thing, and that's not really good at fixing things. And I know the whole reptilian mammalian, human brain thing is kind of BS. They call it the reptilian brain. It could be the mammalian brain. We don't really care. It's old, and it's not appropriate for the situation that we have. Because you think about, when we talk about the reptilian brain, you think about a crocodile. What is the dispute resolution for a crocodile? He eats it or it eats him. That's not really a good place to come at it, for a podcast. Because again, beach is large and he'd be hard to cook.
Next, under healthy responses, we have a readiness to forgive and forget.
And, part of that is the ability to seek compromise and avoid punishing.
Yeah.
And, the thing is like, okay, we've got a podcast and it's more successful, I guess, than initially, at least I thought it was going to be, quicker than I thought it was going to be. And I think you're kind of in the same boat.
Exactly. I'm right on page with you because...
So we've got to figure out how to work together so that this works. And also, we've been friends for, 15 years?
Yeah.
16 years at this point? And it's, it would be kind of stupid to toss that just because of one podcast episode. It's like, okay, you just had a falling out with an old friend based on a text file.
It goes back to knowing what's important.
And I mean, if you're going to fight with a friend over a text file, it should be over the encoding, not the contents.
Exactly.
UTF-8, you're a heretic, right? And but the ultimate thing here.
What do you use then?
UTF-8. I mean, I'm a heretic. But shut up.
I was going to say all my HTML files are UTF-8, so.
Anyway. But the biggest thing here is the belief that resolution can support the interests and needs of both parties, and I think we had that. This wasn't trench warfare.
I would actually change that. No, we got these points were all taken from a really awesome PDF that goes into even more detail,
which will be in the show notes.
Yes, and I would say not a belief, but the knowledge that resolution can support and the interest and needs of both.
Because if you have the belief can be broken.
Yeah.
Like, knowledge is a little bit harder. And it's like, we'll figure out how to make this work in a way that's best for everybody.
And that's exactly like, I was getting to the point where I wanted to stand up and walk out or punch you in the face.
Yeah.
One or the other.
And I was about there, except I wasn't going to walk out because it's my house.
Yeah, you were at the point you wanted to kick me out or punch me in the face.
Yeah.
And that's when I just said, I'm like, I'm getting really frustrated and angry and something's wrong. And you said, me too.
Well, we both had that bellicose kind of just kick the crap out of them and then negotiate after the crap kicking kind of mindset. I'm not going to say that's how we approach life, but it's sort of kind of built into our psyches a little bit, and we both have to moderate that a little bit.
Yes.
And we were both there.
The problem is we're both doers.
Yeah.
It's like you present us with a situation or a problem, and we're the type of people that we go and find the solution.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of developers are like that because that's kind of the mindset you got to be in to be a good developer, really. We have this attitude. Now, for us, because we have the martial arts background, it comes out more physical than some other people.
I mean, we're a little bit testosterone laced a little bit too, and that's totally fine. I guess getting into this, let's talk a little bit about unhealthy responses and what that would have looked like. Now, bear in mind, you get unhealthy responses sometimes on the way to healthy ones.
That's true.
Because like your visceral, normal, it's when you stay in the bad reaction that's when you really get screwed.
And I think the biggest point here, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the biggest point is recognizing there's a conflict.
Yeah.
Like when we realized we're both getting really frustrated and this isn't working.
Yeah, and we better fix it.
Yeah,
because
we stopped what we were doing because that was the problem.
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of beers and we talked about it for about an hour or so.
At least a couple.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you have to work out, but the biggest thing was the inability to recognize and respond to stuff that's important to the other person. Mm-hmm. And we both were kind of in our own mental echo chambers. Especially about halfway through the episode.
And another thing is explosive, angry, hurtful, and resentful reactions.
We had loads of.
Oh yeah, there was quite a few. Like, it started off like that, and neither one of us recognized it. Like, you started off with voicing a valid issue.
Yep.
And I came back with
another valid issue.
Another valid issue, but in a resentful way. And
we were off and running at Rockingham.
Exactly.
There, it went for an hour and a half, and we completely wasted a Monday night that we could have recorded. Well, I wouldn't say we wasted it. We allocated it in a suboptimal way because there was a lot of stuff that came out of this that really needed to happen. But
oh yeah, I mean, personally, I gained a lot from that, and we've already talked about some of the good things that have come from that this past week that have happened with me, not just the job stuff, but some stuff in my personal life that has really probably for the better come about.
Yep.
And things that things I never would have realized had we not had that episode and not had that issue.
Yeah, because like after Monday, it was kind of jarring, I guess, for you a little bit, and you all of a sudden start sending out your resume, and I start getting all these phone calls, people like wanting a character reference. I'm going, okay, something happened, and so it actually did work out pretty well, I think, for both of us, because both of us were we both had our own issues about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So another one is an unhealthy response, withdrawal of love or affection, resulting in rejection, isolation, shaming, and fear of abandonment. Because it's very easy when you get a little frustrated with somebody to start walling off, and then what happens? They get madder, or they get more irritated, and then you continue to wall off,
and they start walling off. I would say withdrawal of friendship too.
Yeah,
even, and it's kind of something that snowballs.
Yeah,
like as you start doing it and they start doing it, if you don't recognize it, like, that's one of the good things about us being friends for so long is
you can tell when the other one's ticked off, even if they don't verbalize it. There's body language cues.
Well, it's like you were saying before the podcast about he who shall not be named. When you're working together, because you've known each other for so long, you can both tell when the other one is having a rough day. And didn't you say he told you, man, you just need to take some time off and go home and relax because it's been a rough day for you today.
Yeah. And I've done the same for him. It's like, dude, I can tell you're mad, and I feel like a chair is going to come flying. Like, I feel like you're going to go Steve Ballmer on me. Mm-hmm. And
what's nice is you guys have been friends almost as long as you and I have been friends. Actually, you guys met through me.
Yeah.
Because of that long friendship, you're able to recognize that and say, hey, something's off. Either let's work on it, or maybe one of us needs to kind of step back and let the other one do their thing or whatever. Of course, we're kind of getting into some of the skills here, but it's hard to talk about unhealthy responses without saying...
Well, unhealthy responses either prompt the end of the friendship or they prompt healthy responses.
I like that. That's really good.
I mean, that's true. Out of, like, experience teaches you how to avoid bad things, and bad things give you experience.
Yeah.
That's all there is. I mean, that's just life.
Well, I mean, it's like...
Another unhealthy response is the expectation of bad outcomes, this is where I started. Because there were a couple of quotes that you had in the outline. We're not going to share the outline because we don't feel like it.
No, we really don't.
but the thing is I'm like, somebody's going to see what you just quoted here, and I'm going to have some Tumblr feminist come after me over a pull quote that somebody else pulled and destroy my life. You start thinking about it, and you start winding up. Mm-hmm. And that's an unhealthy response. Another thing that's unhealthy is the fear and avoidance of conflict, which we kind of did as we were podcasting. We were both ignoring that little sour feeling in the stomach, like something's off, and we...
What got me to the point where I said I'm getting frustrated and angry is you had started going kind of, I don't want to say going off, but you had started talking about some of the issues that you had with the outline, and that got me to the point where I was like, I'm either going to walk out of here and we're never going to do this podcast again, and we may not be friends after this, or I'm going to say something about it.
Yeah.
And
that was the point where you said I'm frustrated and angry. Like, my way of saying I'm frustrated and angry was to basically just start breaking all the mortar out of the joints.
You did, yes. And once we did that, I loved your response. Your response to that was like, I could not have asked for anyone to have a better response, because you said, let's just stop right here, and then got up, grabbed 2 beers, opened them up, and said, let's talk about it, because something's wrong here. We have not had this problem before. Let's figure out what it is.
Yeah. And it's the willingness to go back and try to, because problems are opportunities. Mm-hmm. Like, you're in the situation where it's actually a problem because there's something at stake.
Exactly.
And the fact is if we had a podcast that nobody listened to,
who cared?
Yeah, it would be a drunk conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a podcast that somebody does listen to, it may be a drunk conversation. You never know. But let's talk a little bit about
So let's like you said, let's move into talking about some skills that our listeners can use and kind of how we applied them.
Yeah, let's talk about fighting fair.
You want to do that before we talk about skills?
Yeah, because it is a thing. Like, there is a conflict when you start.
I agree. I like that idea. I put together this outline, but
yeah, and the first thing is to remain calm. Like, you've got to kill the lizard brain. Like, you can't be emotionally reacting to something, because you're probably reacting to the wrong thing.
Well, it goes back to, if I haven't mentioned this before, I'm a big fan of Terry Goodkind's books, and that's your fault, by the way.
I know.
A couple of the things that come out of this is Goodkind has the Wizard's rules, which are based on kind of objectivist mentality, which I do tend to identify with that a lot.
Emotion rules reason.
Yes.
And you have to flip that. That's the second rule. Isn't it? Third rule.
Third rule is passion rules reason.
Yeah.
6th rule is let reason be your only sovereign. Yes, I have them all memorized.
Yeah, express your feelings about things in words, not actions. Like, if I'd punched him in the face, not only is it assault, but the other side of it is it's also not useful. A punch is binary.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Like, the information density in a punch is very low. It doesn't give somebody something to actually work with. And, whereas going, hey, look, I have a problem with A, B, and C, and D. Mm-hmm. That's way more useful.
Well, the same thing with my gut reaction was to get up and walk away or punch you in the face.
Yeah.
And that it takes recognizing those emotions and not letting them rule your reason and rule your behavior.
Right.
And letting your rational mind take control and say, something's up if I'm having these emotions. Because something I used to teach when I was working in the psychiatric hospital and teaching educational groups was emotions are not something we can control. They are a reaction that we have to what's going on around us. What we can control is how we respond to those emotions. Our behavior is what we can control. So in my anger management group, I used to teach that anger is really not good or bad. It's an emotion. It is a reaction that our body has to something that's going on. What's good or bad is the behavior, what we do in response to that emotion.
Well, and sometimes it's almost like some parts of your brain are almost a third party.
Yeah.
Because if you react explosively to anger, you tend to get more of it.
Yes. Yes, you do.
Right then. Mm-hmm. And so distancing yourself from that is productive in that it keeps you from starting that feedback loop.
No. And along those lines, you really want to be specific about what's bothering you.
Yeah,
and this was one issue that
vague sense of unease that I couldn't really.
Like I was saying, this is one of the issues that we had during the whole episode, and it really took about another hour of beer and conversation to get to what was specifically bothering each of us, because neither one of us knew the exact thing.
It was a stack trace of rationalizations.
That is a really great way of putting it. I
mean, that's effectively what it was. It was like you're throwing an error and something else is throwing an error, and it's a different error, and you have to kind of get down there to actually the root cause. And one thing that really helped us a lot was kind of getting into it and going, okay, let's go through one issue at a time. Not I'm going to say something and you're going to go, well, this do the moral equivalence thing, but okay, let's deal with this one thing, and then the next thing.
Yeah, and that really helped us to kind of break it down to get to what the root cause of the problem with that episode was.
Yeah, and it turned out to actually not
be anything either one of us would have thought of.
Well, I think we both kind of walked out of here feeling stupid, because it was like a null error. Completely blown up into the server is on fire. Yes. Yeah. And it was magnified by our behavior, because it wasn't really a problem.
Yeah,
at anywhere near that kind of level. Like if we'd have handled it earlier, it would have been a conversation, not a conflagration.
Yes.
And you can tell that I have had some I've had some very good maple pecan bourbon barrel stout, and that's why I sound like Jesse Jackson, and I'm just like rolling off.
Well, I'm on the Dragon's Milk, our preferred drink for the podcast, but isn't Maple's Pecan made by Bourbon Barrel Stout or New Holland?
I don't know. I think it's a beta, actually.
Is that a beta?
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, it's made in Louisiana.
If you're from New Holland Breweries, please sponsor us. Thank you.
Yeah. Or if you're from Abita, I mean, I used to live in Louisiana.
The next thing we did that's functional is no hitting below the belt.
Yeah, we didn't really attack.
There was a lot of stuff that we both could have said and was probably hanging out there in the air that we really didn't, because there were larger issues that were, like if there was a Venn diagram, there was an overlap.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of things that I know you could have said.
Yeah,
that would have been
vice versa.
Yeah,
and we both knew it, and it's almost like it's like a nuclear deterrent, because it's like once that starts, it's on. And things will be said, and so because like this, it's a podcast episode. We're talking into a microphone, and granted, we realize we're both talking in front of 100 people, but there's not 100 people sitting here, so it doesn't really feel like that.
Have you ever talked in front of a lot of people?
Yes, a few times.
I think the most I've ever done was about 5,000.
Most I've ever done about 300 or 400. But even so, like, there's not that feel of that, right?
Yeah.
It's two dudes in a basement.
Yeah, exactly.
With hopefully functional radon detectors. Like, that's right. Like we don't, it doesn't have that feel to it, and so it feels like, okay, why am I freaking out, and how do I deal with this? And the big thing is like avoiding accusations and generalizations, with dealing with this other person, because okay, I could go, well, you're always doing this, generalization, or you did this, and it ticked me off, like that. That's not productive.
On that too, like. Don't stockpile. Don't add things up
yeah.
that you did in the past. Really, and this really boils down to focusing on the present.
Yeah.
And, you want to focus on the
present. Stuff up from college.
We really could. And in the entire time intervening from college till now.
Yeah, we really could, because we both ticked each other off at various points and, worked it out.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or decided that it wasn't as big of a deal as we're reacting to. Another thing that always helps is avoiding clamming up, because if we hadn't talked, if you had left, we would probably not have a podcast. Even if we'd been okay, it's cool, and you had left, and we hadn't handled it right there, you would have stewed all the way home, and I would have stewed. So getting into some skills, the first thing is quickly relieve stress. You need to get in the habit of being able to let the stress go. And this is actually something I learned from doing kettlebells, because there's an exercise that Pavel Tsatsouline, I can't remember exactly how you pronounce his last name, he does, where you tense your entire body and then you let go immediately. One thing is getting out of that stress, wound up mindset, and a lot of that has to do with actually feeling like you can address issues and get them resolved.
One thing that works for me, and this is the second point in it, is being able to recognize and manage your emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, in order to quickly relieve stress, it's identify the stressful emotion, and how to manage it. Yeah, especially anger. And that's why I said what I said when I was I'm getting very angry and frustrated, or frustrated and angry, however I worded it.
It kind of just popped out of you. And, we were both thinking it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you said it, and then you looked confused for a second because you actually verbalized it.
Yeah, that's very true, because
strange.
It came out of me, and it was I just said that out loud, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, because now it's a conversation rather than two overboiling pots, basically.
Yeah.
Another thing is improving your nonverbal communication skills, which I think we may have fallen down on a little bit, because we both kind of had that hunkered down.
Which, honestly, if we had been doing this if we had been using our nonverbal skills from the very beginning, we never would have done that episode.
Yeah.
We would have looked at the outline, saw each other's nonverbals, and said, there's something wrong here. We would have spent that hour and a half drinking beer and talking about it.
Or we would have done a different episode that we both felt okay with and tabled that one.
Yeah, which we've done that in the past, where we had an episode idea and we said, you know what, this isn't the right time, and we just tabled it.
Yeah, there's something that feels like it's a stinker here.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that is a useful skill here is using the 5 whys. And that actually comes from, I think, Six Sigma manufacturing. I forget where I first heard this, but you keep asking why. But it's not just 5 of them. You keep asking why until you get to something you can control. So, for instance, if I go, hey, my car's engine is overheated, or my car's broken down at the side of the road, and there's steam coming out from under the hood. Why? Well, the engine's overheated. Why? Well, there's not enough oil in it. Why? Well, because I've got a valve that leaks. Why? Because I was lazy and I didn't maintain the car. Now I have something I can control, because I couldn't control those other things. And so you keep asking why until you get to a point where it's okay, here's something that I can actually do something about. That does a couple of things. One is that it empowers you, so you don't feel helpless. That kills a lot of that reptilian brain crap. The other thing that it does is it actually allows you to fix the problem.
The reason for the number 5 is that on average, it takes about 5 whys to reach that.
Yeah, and we went through at least 5.
Yeah, I think we went through a little bit more. Remember, 5 is an average, so sometimes you can get there with less than 5. Sometimes you can get there with more than 5. But the idea is, like Will said, you keep asking why, like a 2-year-old, until you get to the root cause.
It's funny how that works, how that's in our early development. We lose that.
You get to school age, and it kind of gets... The education system suppresses that.
I would agree with that. as far as tips for avoiding conflict, the biggest thing that was kind of a takeaway for us was make the relationship your priority.
Yeah, make our friendship our priority, because that was what's important.
Yeah, because we're still friends even if the podcast ends.
Exactly.
And, that's the important piece here. Another thing is focus on the present. Mm-hmm. Because, I could have brought up, oh, hey, you've been late, X number of times, when we've said, oh, we're going to meet at 5:30, which you were early today. And I realize that completely throws me off when you actually are early because I'm actually late, but I'm here because this is where I live. Mm-hmm. And,
yeah, I pulled up and you were walking the dogs today.
Yeah. And, so there's that.
With a funny hat.
Yeah, you like my hat?
I like the hat.
It keeps the hair out of my eyes and keeps my head from getting cold. Another thing is pick your battles. Because there's some things that, like, at times I've gotten irritated, like you've interjected in podcasts and gone off on a rail somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Because I do that. That's just who I am.
I do too. And some of that, some things that frustrate you are things that you see mirrored about yourself.
Exactly.
And then other things are, okay, well, it irritates me, but does it irritate the listeners? And it probably doesn't.
The other thing too is in that specific example, when you go off on a topic, it doesn't frustrate me as much because I'm the one that does the editing, and I just think, I'll just cut this out.
Just cut it.
Yeah. There have been times where you have just gone off, or when you've repeated yourself several times, where I'm like, I'm just going to let you go because it gets that out, and it gets you to the next thing, and sometimes it brings up stuff that we hadn't originally thought of.
Well, and
I'll just edit out the duplicate information.
We both talk around points like drunk men walk. We get there eventually, but we kind of it's not a real straight line sometimes, and we both get very frustrated when other people do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's something we've had to bear in mind since the beginning. Which is
really funny because a lot of people like the way we do that.
Yeah. Which is strange to me. But
me too.
The next thing is being willing to forgive. And, I would add that with, knowing when to let something go.
Now that last one is very important. It's back to pick your battles, and that's
you don't want to be the guy from Office Space that's like, he took my red stapler off the desk, I'm going to burn the building down.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Office Space metaphors are great for programmers because we all get it. Like, let it go, dude. You can get another red stapler.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that company didn't make those red staplers until that movie got to be a cult classic, and then they realized, okay, now we have to make red staplers. But as an aside, you don't want to be that guy that's wound up over some minutia.
So, in review, just to look back at what we talked about, recognize and resolve your conflicting needs.
Which you and I have those because I've got the stable career, and you're trying to get in there. So you have to do something kind of notary and get attention. Whereas I'm like, attention might not be the best thing for me.
That's very true. That's something I hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
Like, in this whole thing, I had not thought about that, but that's good.
There's that interplaying dynamic, for our needs. And another thing is the management of stress, because when you don't, it's just going to feed back in.
Yeah. And while doing that, you want to remain alert and calm and control your emotions and your behavior. And, that's a point that we had, but I don't really want to say control your emotions, because emotions are a reaction, but control the way you respond to your emotions or your behavior.
Your emotions.
I like that better. I like that best of all.
It's an acknowledgement that, yes, I have this, but it doesn't have me.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what we did. We both said, I'm frustrated and angry. Yeah. Well, it took us a while to get there, but we did. We both said, I'm frustrated and angry.
Nobody ever said we weren't thick-headed idiots.
That's true.
It's just that we can stop being thick-headed idiots at some point. Mm-hmm. That's how you function.
Pay attention to the feelings being expressed, not just of the other person, but your own feelings being expressed. Like, what are you expressing? And it goes back to like the nonverbal cues. Not just what are the nonverbal cues coming from the other person, but what am I portraying as well.
Yeah, and the final thing is, being respectful of differences, because, again, Beej and I we're in different places, we have different worldviews. I'm married, I have a kid, I have a job, I have a business, I have a podcast. Mm-hmm. I've got all this stuff going on that's, in this professional circle, whereas you're trying to break into the market, and you're coming at it from the junior dev side, you're coming at it from the sales side, you're coming at it from the single guy side.
Yeah.
And so your concerns are different than mine. And being aware of where the other person comes from, you're able to actually speak to that versus I'm going to talk at you from my side. Which, if you notice and not to completely derail things, but if you notice the politics in the American presidential race, you realize that's why this country is dysfunctional. It's because everybody's talking from their side, not from the other guy's side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. So that kind of wraps it up. Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
I want to kind of give a little bit of advice. I don't know that it's necessarily so much of a trick as it is just, the scars of an old developer here. I want to talk about picking the right tool for the job, and more specifically, how you know it's the right tool. And contrary to popular belief, you do not ever know that you have the right tool. In fact, the only way that you should be perceiving that you have the right tool is that you're not constantly feeling like you have the wrong one. When you experience significant pain dealing with a particular tool, that should be informative to you. In other words, sit there and go, okay, why does this hurt? Why is this bothering me? We had this discussion earlier this evening. We actually recorded a podcast that we're throwing away. And it's a very similar thing. This is not working for whatever reason. So, try to make it work for a little bit, but don't sink costs. We sunk an hour and a half recording, but, it's a thought process of if something's not working appropriately, stop using it. Figure out the appropriate tool for the job. When you're experiencing pain, mental, physical, whatever, is a recognition that what you're doing is not congruent with where you want to go. So bear in mind that pain is a physiological, mental, spiritual reaction to something that you should not be doing. That's why it's there. It's to discourage you. Now, sometimes, things are actually legitimately difficult, or it's difficult because you're learning. So, bear that in mind. But if you're competent at whatever language you're using, and you've been using it a while, and then the way you're trying to do something isn't working, instead of doubling down on that, try to figure out why it hurts and how to get rid of the pain rather than how to endure the pain.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Purebell, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at www.CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod, and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.